The sun had barely risen over the small town that morning. The air was still cool with a light mist floating above the empty streets. A few birds chirped on the power lines as cars rolled past one by one, heading to work, school, or maybe nowhere in particular. At the corner of the road stood a small gas station, the kind that had seen better days. The paint on the sign was peeling, and one of the lights over the pump had been flickering for weeks. Still, it was the only place open early enough for people passing through. A small, worn-out silver sedan pulled into the station, its tires crunching over the gravel. Inside sat a tired-looking woman in her early 30s. Her hair was messy, pulled back in a loose ponytail, and there were faint dark circles under her eyes. In the back seat, two small children were half asleep, their heads resting against each other. The woman's name was Laura, and it had already been a rough morning. Not that most of her mornings were ever easy. She had been up since 5, trying to get her kids ready for school, making breakfast out of what little food she had left in the fridge, and double-checking her old car to make sure it would start. She was supposed to have a job interview that morning, her first one in months. It wasn't her dream job, just a cleaning position at a local office building, but it meant steady income. It meant she could finally pay rent on time. It meant she could stop worrying about the electricity being shut off again. As she pulled up beside the gas pump, she looked at the dashboard. The fuel light was flashing. The needle was so low it looked like it might drop off the gauge completely. She sighed, rubbing her forehead. "Come on, just hold on a little longer," she whispered to the car as if it could hear her. Her kids stirred in the back seat. The older one, maybe 6 or 7, blinked his sleepy eyes and asked softly, "Mom, are we going to be late again?" "Not if I can help it," she said, forcing a small smile. "Just close your eyes for a few more minutes, okay? I'll be quick." She opened her purse and started counting coins and crumpled bills. Her fingers moved slowly, carefully, like each coin mattered, because it did. There were a few quarters, a few dimes, and $3 bills. She counted again just to be sure. Then she let out a small, frustrated laugh. $4.60, she muttered. That's not even 2 gallons. She looked toward the station window where a young man in a blue work shirt stood behind the counter. He looked to be in his mid-20s, maybe a little younger, with dark hair tucked under a faded baseball cap. He was sipping from a styrofoam cup and scrolling through something on his phone. Laura took a deep breath, got out of the car, and walked toward the door. The bell above it jingled softly when she stepped inside. The smell of coffee and old motor oil mixed in the air. The worker looked up and smiled politely. "Morning," he said. "Morning," she replied, her voice quiet. Can I get $4.60 on pump 3? He nodded and tapped on the register. "Sure thing." Then he paused. "You okay there? You look like you've had a long morning." She hesitated, not sure whether to laugh or cry. "Yeah, you could say that," she said. "Just trying to get the kids to school and make it to a job interview after." "I didn't realize how low the tank was." He nodded understandingly. "Yeah, that happens. You want me to start it up for you?" "Please," she said. As he turned to the window, Laura stood there for a moment, biting her lip. She wanted to ask something, but pride got in the way. Then she thought about her kids in the car, how she didn't want them to see her struggling. Finally, she took a breath and spoke. "Hey, I'm short. I was wondering if maybe—" Her voice trailed off. "I'm short about $15. I just need enough to get across town. I can come back and pay later, I promise." The worker turned back toward her. For a second, he didn't say anything. He just looked at her, really looked. He could see how tired she was. He could see the worry behind her forced smile. It wasn't the kind of story you make up. She wasn't trying to trick anyone. She was just trying to make it through the day. He scratched the back of his neck. "I'd like to help, but the register tracks everything. My boss would lose it if I messed with it." She nodded quickly. "It's okay, I understand. I shouldn't have asked." She turned to walk out, embarrassed. But something tugged at him. Maybe it was the way she kept glancing back at her kids in the car. Maybe it was the way she said, "I can pay later," like she meant it. He'd grown up in a house where money was always tight. He knew that look. The mix of worry and hope that people carried when they were doing their best and still falling short. "Hey," he called out before she reached the door. She turned around. Surprised, he hesitated a moment, then said quietly, "Go ahead and fill it up." Don't worry about the 15. I'll take care of it. Her mouth opened slightly. Are you serious? He nodded. Alicia, just promise me you'll come back when you can. Or maybe just pay it forward someday. Her eyes started to water. I don't know what to say. Thank you. Really, thank you, he smiled. It's no problem. Get to that interview. You've got this. Laura wiped her eyes and hurried out, her heart pounding. She picked up the nozzle, started the pump, and watched the numbers climb. For the first time that morning, she felt a bit of hope. The world hadn't been kind to her lately, but here was someone, a stranger, willing to show a bit of kindness when she needed it most. Inside, the worker watched from the window. He didn't care about the money. $15 wasn't much, but it could mean everything to someone else. He remembered his mom working double shifts when he was a kid, how she sometimes had to choose between gas and groceries. If someone had helped her back then, even once, maybe things would have been a little easier. When Laura finished pumping, she put the nozzle back, waved at him through the window, and mouthed a thank you. He waved back, smiling. As she drove away, her kids sat up asking what had happened. She told them, that nice man helped us. He let us fill the tank. Isn't that kind? Her little girl smiled. So we can go to school now? Yeah, she said softly, her eyes glistening. We can go to school. For the next few miles, she couldn't stop smiling. She made it to the school drop-off just in time, kissed her kids goodbye, and then drove toward the interview. She didn't know what would happen there and whether she'd get the job or not, but she felt lighter. Back at the gas station, the worker cleaned the counter and got back to his usual routine. The morning rush picked up, cars coming and going, people grabbing coffee or snacks before heading out. He didn't think much more about what he'd done. To him, it was just the right thing to do. But somewhere deep down, he hoped she'd be okay. He didn't know that this small act of kindness would change both their lives before the day was over. The morning rush at the gas station slowly faded as the sun climbed higher in the sky. The hum of cars on the road mixed with the faint sound of birds from the nearby trees. Inside the small station, the worker stood behind the counter, wiping down the coffee area and stacking snack bags on the shelves. He wasn't thinking much about what had happened earlier, not because it didn't matter, but because it had felt like the right thing to do. To him, helping someone in need wasn't something to brag about. It was just something you did if you had the chance. Still, every now and then, his mind drifted back to the woman with the tired eyes and her 2 kids in the back seat. He wondered if she'd made it to that interview on time. He hoped she did. The bell above the door jingled as a man walked in to buy cigarettes. Then another customer came to fill up his truck. The usual rhythm of the day continued. The worker greeted people, made small talk, and handed out change. It was an ordinary job. Long hours, minimum pay, and a boss who seemed to care more about the numbers on the screen than the people behind the counter. But for now, it paid the bills, and that was enough. He leaned against the counter during a quiet moment and looked out the window. The sunlight reflected off the pumps, and a small breeze made the station flag flutter slightly. He thought about how life could change so quickly. One decision, one small act, could change someone's whole day, maybe even their future. That thought made him smile a little. A few minutes later, the sound of heavy boots echoed from the back office. His manager, a middle-aged man with a sharp voice and a permanent frown, stepped out holding a clipboard. He looked around, checking the shelves and the register. You finished the inventory? The manager asked without looking up. Almost, the worker said. I'll have it done before lunch. Good, the manager replied flatly. He walked around the counter, glancing at the numbers on the screen. Everything look right here? The worker nodded. Yeah, it's fine. The manager tapped on the register, scrolling through transactions. Then he paused. His eyebrows lowered. What's this one? He asked, pointing at the screen. Pump 3, $15 unpaid. The worker froze for a second. He hadn't thought about that moment being recorded. He didn't even realize the register still showed the gap. Oh, that one, he started. It's covered. I was going to pay for it myself later today. The manager turned toward him slowly. You were going to pay for it later? Yeah, there was a woman this morning. She was short on gas money. I told her I'd take care of the difference. She had kids with her and she said she'd pay it back. The manager's face tightened. You let someone take gas without paying? She didn't steal it, the worker said quickly. I told her it was fine. I didn't want her to get stuck somewhere with her kids. The manager crossed his arms. Do you realize what you just admitted? That's theft. That's company loss. You can't just give away gas like it's a charity. We have rules here. It was only $15, the worker said quietly. I was going to cover it myself after my shift. That's not the point. The manager snapped. The rule is no pay, no fuel. You broke that rule. You made a decision that wasn't yours to make. The worker didn't say anything for a moment. He could feel the tension rising in the air, the kind that made your stomach twist. I'm sorry, he said finally. I just thought... That's the problem, the manager interrupted. You thought? You're not paid to think. You're paid to follow the rules. A silence fell between them. The only sound was the faint hum of the refrigerator behind the counter. Clean out your locker, the manager said coldly. You're done here. The worker blinked, thinking maybe he'd misheard. Wait, what? You're fired, the manager said, his tone firm and final. We can't have people who give away company product. I'll report the loss to accounting. The words hit him like a punch to the chest, fired just like that. Over $15. He tried to explain again, but the manager had already turned and walked back toward the office, muttering something about irresponsibility. The worker stood there, stunned. His hands felt heavy and his mouth went dry. He wanted to argue, to say it wasn't fair, but deep down he knew it wouldn't matter. The decision was made. For a moment, he just stood behind the counter, staring at the pumps outside. The same ones he had stood by that morning when he helped that mother. The same ones that now cost him his job. He finally moved, walking to the small break room in the back. His locker was nearly empty, just a few things. His jacket, a folded-up photo of his younger brother, and a sandwich he'd packed for lunch. He put them all into a small box and looked around the room one last time. It wasn't a glamorous job, but it was what he had. It paid his rent, his groceries, his bills. He didn't have much of a safety net. Losing it meant starting over again, something that felt harder each time. He carried the box outside and leaned it against his bike. He didn't drive. The gas station was only a few miles from where he lived, so biking saved him money. He sat on the curb for a while, just staring at the ground. A few cars came and went. Some people glanced at him but didn't stop. To them, he was just another guy sitting outside a gas station. No one knew what had just happened. He sighed deeply and rubbed his hands over his face. I was just trying to do something good, he whispered to himself. Guess that doesn't count for much anymore. The sky was clear now, and the sun felt warmer on his skin. He didn't know what to do next. Maybe he could find another job in town. Maybe the car wash down the road was hiring. But right now, he just needed a minute to think. He thought about calling someone, maybe his brother, but then decided against it. He didn't want to sound like he was complaining. He'd figure it out. He always did. Inside the gas station, his former manager was on the phone, telling someone from corporate about the incident. The worker could hear bits of the conversation through the glass. He could hear words like policy, violation, and termination. Each word made his chest tighten a little more. After a few minutes, he stood up, picked up his box, and started to unlock his bike. He was about to leave when he noticed a car pulling into the lot. A big, dark vehicle that didn't quite fit in with the small-town surroundings. The sunlight bounced off its smooth surface, and as it got closer, he could see the silver emblem on the front. A Rolls-Royce. It glided to a stop near the pumps. The engine purred quietly, almost like a whisper. He'd never seen a car like that in person before. It was the kind of car you only saw in magazines or movies. He frowned, slightly curious. People who drove cars like that usually didn't stop at places like this. Maybe they were lost, or maybe they needed directions. The driver's door opened slowly and a man stepped out. He was dressed in a crisp suit, his shoes shining like they'd just been polished. He looked around for a second, then his eyes landed on the worker. He started walking toward him. The worker straightened up a bit, unsure of what to expect. The man's expression wasn't angry or rushed, and it was calm, almost warm. He stopped a few feet away. "Excuse me," the man said politely. "Are you the one who was working here earlier this morning?" The worker nodded, confused. "Yeah, that's me." The man smiled slightly. "Good, I was hoping I'd find you." The worker tilted his head. "Why, did something happen?" The man's smile grew a little. "You could say that," he said. But I think you'll want to hear this. The worker glanced toward his bike, still holding the small box in his hands. He didn't know who this man was or what he wanted. But something about the way the man spoke, calm, certain, kind, made him pause. The man nodded toward the station. Do you have a few minutes to talk? I think you deserve to know what your kindness did today. The worker blinked, taken off guard. He had no idea what was coming. But in that moment, standing outside the gas station he'd just been fired from, holding the few things he owned with the sound of a luxury car idling nearby, he couldn't help but feel like maybe, just maybe, the day wasn't over yet. He didn't know it. But his life was about to take a turn he never expected. The man in the suit stood in front of the worker, the gentle hum of the Rolls-Royce behind him. For a few seconds, neither of them said anything. The worker felt nervous, unsure why someone like this had come looking for him. The man smiled politely, noticing the box in his hands. Rough day? He asked. The worker gave a small laugh that didn't sound very cheerful. You could say that. Just got fired about 30 minutes ago. The man's eyebrows lifted slightly. Fired? Yeah, the worker said, shrugging. For helping someone. I let a lady fill her tank even though she was short $15. She had kids with her, and she was trying to get to a job interview. My boss didn't like that. The man listened quietly, his expression thoughtful. And you didn't ask for anything from her? The worker shook his head. No, she said she'd pay me back later. But even if she didn't, that's fine. I just didn't want her stuck somewhere with kids in the car. The man nodded slowly as if confirming something to himself. Then he said, that woman, that was my wife. The worker blinked. What? She came home about an hour ago, the man continued. Told me what happened. Said a young man at a gas station helped her when she couldn't afford to fill her tank. She was crying when she told me. Not because she was embarrassed him, but because someone actually cared. The worker stared at him, stunned. She got home okay? The man smiled. She did. And she made it to her interview, too. She said she walked in feeling more confident than she had in years. You gave her that. The worker didn't know what to say. He wasn't used to people thanking him like this. He looked down at the ground, kicking at a pebble with his shoe. I just did what anyone would have done, he said softly. The man shook his head. No, not anyone would have done that. Most people would have turned her away. Most people would have followed the rule book. He paused, studying the young man's tired face. You followed your heart instead. That matters more than you think. The worker felt a lump form in his throat. For the first time since being fired, he didn't feel angry, just overwhelmed. I don't even know your name, the man said kindly. He told him. Well, the man said, repeating it with a nod. I'm glad I found you. My name's Daniel. The worker nodded politely, still unsure where this was going. Daniel glanced toward the gas station, then back at him. Did your boss really fire you over $15? Yeah, he said, letting out a small sigh. Said I broke policy. Guess kindness doesn't fit in their budget. Daniel's expression darkened a little, not out of anger, but disbelief. That's ridiculous. Then his tone softened again. Listen, I run a few businesses around here. Restaurants, a car dealership, some construction work. But the truth is, I've been looking for someone with real character, someone honest, someone who does the right thing even when no one's watching. He paused for a moment before continuing. When my wife told me about you, I knew I had to meet you. People like you are rare. The worker blinked, trying to process what he was hearing. Are you saying... Daniel smiled. I'm saying I have a job for you if you want it. The worker stared at him, speechless. A job doing what? That depends on what you're interested in, Daniel said. I can train you. I believe in giving people a chance, especially those who've earned it. And you've earned it. For a moment, the worker didn't know what to say. It felt like the world had spun upside down in just a few hours. 1 minute he was being fired. The next, a man in a Rolls-Royce was offering him a new start. I don't know what to say, he finally murmured. Say you'll think about it, Daniel said with a small grin. The worker nodded slowly. Yeah, I'll think about it. Thank you. I don't even know how to thank you. Daniel reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card. Here's my number. Call me later today. We'll talk details. He handed over the card, thick, white and clean with golden letters pressed neatly across it. It felt strange in the worker's hand, like holding a key to a door he never knew existed. I should tell you, Daniel added. My wife said you didn't hesitate. You didn't ask questions or look annoyed. You just helped. That says everything I need to know about your character." The worker's throat tightened. He nodded again, still at a loss for words. "Thank you, really." Daniel gave a small nod. "We'll talk soon. And don't worry about what happened here. Sometimes losing something small is just life's way of making space for something bigger." With that, Daniel turned and walked back toward his car. The worker stood there, holding the card, watching as the Rolls-Royce pulled away. The sound of its quiet engine faded down the road until it disappeared completely. For a long time, he didn't move. He just stood by his bike, looking at the card in his hand. He couldn't believe what had just happened. He looked back toward the gas station. His manager was still inside, probably filling out more paperwork. For a second, he thought about going back in, maybe saying something smart, maybe telling him that he'd just been offered a better job, but then he smiled to himself. No, there was no point. He didn't need to prove anything to anyone. He tucked the card into his pocket, got on his bike, and started pedaling home. As he rode, the breeze brushed against his face. The streets looked the same as they always did. The little grocery store on the corner, the bakery with the hand-painted sign, the kids on bikes racing down the sidewalk. But something inside him felt different, lighter, hopeful. He thought about the woman and her kids. He was glad they were safe. He wondered if she got the job. Maybe she'd call one day to tell him. Maybe not. Either way, he was happy to know they were okay. By the time he reached his apartment, the morning had turned to noon. The building was small and old, with cracked paint on the walls and mailboxes that didn't close properly. He carried his box upstairs and unlocked his door. Inside, everything was quiet. A small fan buzzed in the corner, and a stack of bills sat on the table. He set the box down and sat beside it, staring at the business card again. He couldn't stop thinking about Daniel's words. Sometimes losing something small is just life's way of making space for something bigger. He smiled to himself. Maybe that was true. Maybe for the first time in a long while, things were starting to turn around. He decided to call later in the afternoon. He wanted to give himself time to think, to make sure this was real. He made a simple lunch, sat by the window and looked outside at the quiet street. Hours passed slowly. The sun shifted across the floor, casting long shadows on the wall. He found himself replaying the entire day in his mind. The woman's worried face, her kids in the back seat, his decision to help, the manager's anger, and finally that silver Rolls-Royce pulling into the lot. It all felt like something out of a movie. Except it wasn't, it was real. And it all started with one small act of kindness. As evening approached, he finally picked up his phone and dialed the number on the card. His hands trembled a little. After 2 rings, Daniel's calm voice answered. "Hello?" "Hey," the worker said, trying not to sound nervous. "It's me, from the gas station." Daniel sounded genuinely pleased. "I was hoping you'd call. You ready to talk?" They spoke for almost half an hour. Daniel explained that he managed several family businesses and needed someone reliable, someone with integrity. He offered him a position starting the following week, with better pay than he'd ever earned before. Training included, full benefits. When the call ended, the worker sat there quietly, staring at the wall. A wave of relief washed over him. He hadn't just found another job. He'd been given a chance, and a real chance, and to build something better. That night, he couldn't sleep. His mind kept drifting back to everything that had happened in one single day. How easily he could have made a different choice. How easily he could have told that mother no. But he didn't. And now his life was different because of it. He thought about what Daniel said, about how doing the right thing, even when no one's watching, can change everything. He didn't think of himself as special. He wasn't a hero. He was just someone who believed in being decent. As he finally drifted off to sleep, he whispered to himself, maybe kindness really does come back around. The world outside was quiet, the streetlights glowing faintly through his window. Tomorrow would be a new day, one filled with hope, gratitude, and maybe even a fresh start. And while he didn't know it yet, his story, the one that began with a simple choice at a gas pump, was far from over. The next few days passed slowly, but they were filled with something he hadn't felt in a long time: hope. Every morning he woke up early, made a cup of coffee, and checked his phone to make sure the call from Daniel hadn't been some strange dream. But it was real. Daniel had followed through exactly as promised. He was set to start work the following Monday. The job wasn't just a paycheck, and it was a real opportunity. A clean slate, a chance to do something that mattered. He spent the weekend preparing. He cleaned his small apartment, pressed his only decent shirt, and even borrowed a better pair of shoes from his younger brother. It wasn't about impressing anyone. It was about showing respect for the chance he'd been given. That Sunday night, he could hardly sleep. He lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying the events that had led to this. The gas station, the mother, her kids, the firing, the Rolls-Royce. It all felt like fate, like the world had taken him through something hard just to bring him somewhere better. When Monday morning came, he was up before the sun. The air outside was crisp and the street was still quiet. He took his old bike, the same one he'd ridden home from the gas station, and made his way across town. The address Daniel had given him led to a tall building made of glass and steel, clean, bright, and modern. It looked nothing like the small gas station where he used to work. He stopped for a moment before going inside, taking a deep breath to calm his nerves. Inside, a receptionist greeted him with a warm smile. "You must be the new hire," she said. "Daniel's expecting you." He nodded, his heart pounding a little faster. She led him through a long hallway and into a large office. Daniel stood near the window, talking on the phone. When he saw the young man walk in, he ended the call and smiled. "You made it," he said. "Wouldn't miss it," the worker replied. Daniel gestured for him to sit down. "I'm glad you're here. I've been thinking a lot about our conversation. You told me you wanted to do something meaningful, something that actually helps people. I believe this is the place for you." He then explained that the position would be a mix of customer relations and training, helping oversee a few of Daniel's small business projects. It wasn't hard labor, but it required trust, honesty, and good judgment. "I know you don't have fancy degrees or experience in this field," Daniel said, "but that doesn't matter to me. I care about who you are. I can teach the rest." The young man nodded quietly. "I'll do my best. I promise I won't let you down." "I don't think you will," Daniel said with a smile. "Now let's get you started." The first day went by in a blur. There was so much to learn: paperwork, systems, procedures. But what stood out most wasn't the work itself. It was the environment. Everyone was kind, helpful, patient. It was a completely different world from the gas station, where people rarely even made eye contact. Here he felt like he belonged. At lunchtime, Daniel invited him to eat together in the break room. Over sandwiches and coffee, Daniel shared more about his family, his wife, their kids, and how tough things had been for them before his business grew. "She told me that morning at the gas station was one of the lowest points in her life," Daniel said softly. "She was running late for her interview, worried about disappointing everyone. Then she met you. You gave her hope. And she got the job, by the way." The worker smiled, genuinely happy. "That's really good to hear." Daniel nodded. "She wanted me to tell you thank you again. She says you didn't just help her with gas, you helped her believe good people still exist." The worker looked down, feeling his eyes sting a little. "That means a lot," he said quietly. "I didn't do much." Daniel shook his head. "You did enough to change someone's day and maybe their life. Don't ever think small kindness doesn't matter." After lunch, the worker returned to his tasks with renewed energy. Every time he made a mistake, Daniel or another employee would calmly help him fix it. No yelling, no scolding, just patience and respect. It felt strange in the best way. By the end of the day, he was exhausted but grateful. When he left the building, the sunset painted the sky orange and gold. He stood outside for a moment, watching it, realizing how far he'd come in such a short time. A week turned into 2, then 3. He started to get comfortable. Not too comfortable, but enough to feel confident. He learned fast, asked questions, and even started offering ideas to improve things. People noticed. One Friday afternoon, as he was about to leave, Daniel called him into the office. "I wanted to talk to you," Daniel said, leaning back in his chair. "You've been doing really well here. Everyone says you're polite, hardworking, and reliable. I can see that myself." The young man smiled, a little embarrassed. "I just try to do what's right," Daniel chuckled. "That's exactly why I hired you, and it's why I want to offer you something." He handed him a small envelope. "It's not much, but it's a bonus. You've earned it." The worker hesitated before opening it. Inside was a check. More money than he'd seen on a single paycheck in months. He didn't know what to say. "Thank you. I really don't know what to say." "Say you'll keep doing what you're doing," Daniel said. "Kindness brought you here. Keep that same heart." The worker nodded, smiling. "I will." That night, he took his brother out for dinner at a small diner they used to visit as kids. It wasn't fancy, just burgers and fries, but it felt special. They laughed, talked about old times, and for once he didn't have to worry about whether he could afford it. When he got home, he placed the bonus check carefully on his table. Then he took out a small envelope and wrote a note on it. The next morning, he went back to the gas station. His old manager was at the counter, surprised to see him walk in. "Didn't think you'd show your face here again," the manager said coldly. The worker smiled politely. "I'm not here for trouble. Just wanted to settle something." He pulled out $15 in cash and placed it on the counter. "That's for the gas from a few weeks ago. The woman paid me back in a way you wouldn't believe." The manager frowned, confused. "What are you talking about?" The worker smiled, turning to leave. "Let's just say it was worth it." He walked out before the manager could respond, feeling lighter with every step. Outside, he looked around at the small town, the streets he'd biked for years, the same old signs, the same cracked sidewalks. Everything looked the same, but somehow it all felt different. Maybe it was him who had changed. That night when he got home, he sat by the window again and thought about everything that had happened. It was strange how life worked, how one small moment of kindness could ripple outward and come back in unexpected ways. He realized something too. It wasn't just about luck. It was about choice. He could have ignored that woman at the pump. He could have told her no, but he hadn't, and that single decision had led him to everything that was now in front of him. As he sat there, his phone buzzed. It was a message from Daniel. "Dinner tomorrow at our place. My wife wants to meet you properly." He smiled and texted back, "I'd be honored. See you then." The next evening, he arrived at Daniel's home, a beautiful house surrounded by tall trees and glowing lights along the driveway. Daniel's wife greeted him warmly at the door, smiling from ear to ear. "I finally get to thank you in person," she said, hugging him gently. "You didn't just help me that morning, you helped my whole family." He smiled shyly. "I'm just glad it worked out." They all sat down for dinner. Laughter, good food, and stories filled the room. It felt less like a fancy dinner and more like being part of a family. The kids ran around. The house smelled like roasted chicken and everything felt warm and peaceful. At one point during dinner, Daniel looked at him and said, "You know, I've met a lot of people in my life, but I can't remember the last time someone impressed me this much without even trying. You reminded us that kindness still exists, and it matters." The young man smiled quietly. "I just did what felt right." "And that's what makes it so special," Daniel replied. The rest of the night was filled with laughter and comfort. When he finally left, Daniel walked him to the door and said, "You're not just an employee to me, you're family now." He didn't know what to say, only that his heart felt full. As he rode home under the soft glow of the streetlights, he thought about how everything had come together, not through luck or wealth, but through a simple choice to be kind. And though he didn't know what tomorrow would bring, one thing was certain: he'd never forget the day he decided to help someone, and how that moment changed everything. A few months had passed since that unforgettable night at Daniel's house. The days no longer felt heavy like they used to. The young man had fallen into a new rhythm: work, home, rest, and back again. But now every day had purpose. He woke up earlier than before, not because he had to, but because he wanted to. He'd make coffee, open the curtains, and feel a quiet sense of pride just looking out the window. Life wasn't perfect. Bills still came, groceries still cost money, and there were still challenges. But he had stability now. He had a future to look forward to. At work, things were going even better. Daniel had started trusting him with more responsibility, handling meetings, organizing projects, and even helping with hiring new staff. Sometimes when he looked around the office, he still couldn't believe this was his life. A few months ago, he was just a gas station worker trying to get by. Now he was part of something bigger. But what meant the most wasn't the paycheck or the title. It was the people, the kindness, the feeling that he mattered. That simple thing had changed everything for him. One afternoon, as he was finishing some reports, Daniel stopped by his desk. "Got a minute?" Daniel asked with a smile. Of course, he said, standing up. Let's take a walk, Daniel said, motioning toward the hallway. They stepped outside into the cool breeze. The parking lot was quiet, the sky a soft shade of blue. Daniel leaned against a railing and looked at him thoughtfully. You've been doing great here, Daniel began. Better than I expected, honestly. I've been watching the way you treat people, your patience, your honesty. You've got something that can't be taught. The young man smiled modestly. I just try to treat people how I'd want to be treated. Daniel nodded slowly. That's exactly what I mean. I've been thinking. How would you feel about running one of our new branches? We're opening a small location across town and I need someone I can trust. The young man froze for a second, not sure he'd heard right. You mean, you want me to manage it? Daniel grinned. That's what I'm saying. He was speechless. I don't even know what to say. I've never managed anything before. You've been managing your life just fine, Daniel replied kindly. You've shown more leadership in a few months than some people do in years. I'll help you learn the rest. He stood there, stunned but grateful. I'll do it. I won't let you down. I know you won't, Daniel said, patting his shoulder. That night, when he got home, he sat quietly for a long time. He thought about everything that had happened since that one moment at the gas station, how his whole world had shifted from one small act. He thought about the mother, about her kids, about Daniel and his family. How one simple yes to kindness had led to this. He didn't know where she was now or if she even knew what her husband had done for him. But he wished he could tell her thank you, not just for the opportunity, but for reminding him that doing good was never wasted. The next few weeks were busy. He trained new employees, set up the new office, and handled paperwork he never thought he'd understand. There were long days, small mistakes, and plenty of learning, but every time he felt tired, he remembered why he was doing it. People started respecting him, and not because of his title, but because of how he treated them. He listened, he helped, he cared. Some of the workers even started calling him the kind boss. Every time he heard it, he smiled quietly. One Friday afternoon, as he was about to leave, he saw a familiar car pull into the parking lot, a black Rolls-Royce. He blinked in surprise. It couldn't be. The car door opened and Daniel stepped out with his wife. They both looked proud and happy. We were in the neighborhood, Daniel said, smiling. Thought we'd stop by and see how you're doing. He laughed. You could have just called. Daniel's wife smiled warmly. We wanted to see it for ourselves. You've made this place feel special. Everyone talks about how kind and fair you are. He looked around, a little embarrassed but deeply touched. I'm just trying to follow your example. Daniel shook his head. No, you're doing it your own way, and that's what makes it work. They toured the small office together. The employees smiled and greeted Daniel and his wife with respect, but it was clear who they looked up to now. The young man had become the heart of that place. Afterward, they all sat down for coffee in his modest office. Daniel looked around and said quietly, You know, when I met you, I had no idea how things would turn out. But I'm really glad we crossed paths that day. The young man smiled. Me too. I've thought about that day a lot. How strange it is that everything can change from one small moment. Daniel's wife nodded. That's how life works sometimes. One act of kindness can open 100 doors. They stayed for a while, talking, laughing, sharing stories. Before they left, Daniel said something that stayed with him forever. Never forget where you came from, Daniel said softly. That's what keeps your heart grounded. No matter how far you go, stay the same person who helped a stranger without expecting anything back. He nodded, feeling the weight of those words. I won't forget. After they left, he sat alone for a while, looking around the office, the desk, the chairs, the faces of people who now relied on him. It all felt unreal, yet perfectly right. As he was locking up to leave, a woman with 2 small children came rushing up to the door. Her car was parked just outside, and she looked worried. Excuse me, she said, a little breathless. Do you know where I can find a mechanic around here? My car just stopped, and I don't have much gas left. For a brief second, he froze, because it felt like life was replaying itself. The same kind of moment, the same kind of person in need. He smiled softly and said, Don't worry about it. You can leave your car here tonight if you need. There's a station just down the road. I'll drive you there. She hesitated. Oh no, I couldn't ask that of you. You don't even know me, he smiled again. That's okay. Someone once helped a stranger like you. It's my turn now. She looked at him, unsure at first, but then she smiled too. Thank you, she whispered. He helped her and her kids get gas, even paid for it when her card didn't work. When she tried to apologize, he waved it off. "You'll pay it forward someday. That's how it works." Later that night, as he rode home, he thought about how life had come full circle, how he had once been the one struggling to hold things together, and now he was the one offering help. It made him realize something powerful, that the real reward for kindness isn't money or luck or opportunity. It's the chance to give back, to keep the chain going. When he got home, he sat by the window again, the same spot where he used to sit when things were uncertain, the same quiet street, but now, instead of fear or worry, all he felt was peace. He looked up at the sky, remembering every twist and turn that had brought him here. The firing, the disbelief, the kindness that came back to him in a way he never could have imagined. He smiled and whispered softly to himself, "Sometimes losing something is just life making space for something better." And deep down, he knew, that moment at the gas station wasn't the end of something. It was the beginning. He had no idea what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, he wasn't afraid of it, because now he understood something simple and true, that kindness, no matter how small, has a way of finding its way back, always.